Hello, everyone, and welcome to a bonus short episode of, I guess, something we might occasionally do, which is talking about crazy paranormal stuff or whatever else we might find interesting from spirituality, because there's like interesting nooks and crannies, besides ghosts or aliens or demons or whatever the heck else we like spoke about in the very first episode. There's also myths and whatever ideas else about certain types of maybe monsters or uh, in this case, this particular case, Bigfoot Australian version Yowie, whatever Yowie, right? That's the name of it.
Yowie.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the
Yowie.
Australian Bigfoot, and basically this is gonna be a story time from Jess. So I'm gonna be hearing something for the first time. I feel like I have heard a bit of a glimpse or whatever around it when someone was referencing Yowie talking about whatever else they found or saw in America's mountains. Obviously those two don't connect, but yeah, it's one of those things that I don't really know too much about because I don't research it. So tell me all about it.
I mean, we're gonna get into it. I feel like you're gonna also ask me some questions,
Yes, I
but
am.
I may know the answers, I may not. So,
This
bear with
isn't
us, guys, because I'm not the expert on Yowies.
We're not professionals or experts in this. This is one of the things that is always going to be foggy. We're not teaching people. We're just talking about the
Mhm.
probability, possibility, or knowledge, or whatever we like else think or have ideas around weird paranormal things
Yeah.
that are around the planet.
I mean, in saying that, just before we started recording this episode, I literally looked up Yowie, and there was an article that had just been posted 5 hours ago about how Yowie supposedly kill people, which is going to be really interesting
Mhm.
when we get into the story that I have to tell, because I kind of don't think that's a thing.
Mm.
If what I have been told is true, I don't think so. I think this guy's kinda taken a leap too far.
Mhm.
Um, so let's get into it. So the interesting thing for me is just to give a bit of a backstory is, Yowie is quite often, within the Australian culture, is seen as like a big, hairy man. Similar to, like, however you see Bigfoot all over the world, big hairy man type thing. Um, the funny thing with this is the area in which I grew up in, there have been a number of Yowie sightings. There's a town, not too far from, well, it's a reasonable drive, but still fairly close, and it has a park with a Yowie it actually has 2 Yowie statues in the one park.
Mhm.
Um, and so as a child, like, I remember looking up and seeing, like, this statue of what I saw was a man, and I was like, "Why is the man like that? Why is there a statue of a man that looks like," and then my dad's like, "That's a Yowie," and I was like, "It just looks like a man to me."
Mhm.
Like, I don't get it. And they had to explain that, Yowie is, and he like hides. He's a mythical creature that is made up. And even back then, intuitively, there was a part of me that was like, I don't know, like I feel like Yowies are probably real. But at the same time, they're not quite right. There's something off around the mythology around it, them being like almost a caveman, because
Mhm.
that's kind of quite often what they're, and even Bigfoot is seen as a caveman.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if this guy is supposedly meant to be hiding, meant to be doing like still living and obviously reproducing or living for an extremely long time, um, how like he's got to be fairly smart to kind of hide away
Mhm.
from everyone in the population. That doesn't make any sense to me as a small child. And I think that's the case, I think, with a lot of people of like, well, Bigfoot can't be real because like there's so many people everywhere that have to be in the really remote part of the bush and occasionally run into people and they get afraid and they run away.
Mhm.
Um, and so Bigfoot itself, so to speak, has been a part of my upbringing. And there is even, I will say, for people in Australia will love this, but I think you can actually still get these chocolates in places overseas as well. I don't know if they sell them in Australia anymore. But we used to have like for people in Europe, will understand this Kinder Surprises, but the Kinder Surprises were Yowies, and they had like different versions of Yowies, and they had little figurines of Australian animals and stuff, like as
That's
if it
so
was a Kinder
adorable.
Surprise inside,
That's
and
so
they gave you
nice.
information about the animals and stuff. Really, really like they were like the chocolate was pretty good, and you
Wait,
learned
wait, wait,
stuff
wait.
about animals.
So what did if they had Yowies? What the heck did they write about Yowies?
They didn't write anything about Yowies. In fact, that was so mainstream, right? So mainstream. They were just called Yowies. They kind of said that they were mythical creatures in Australia. Um, and they made them very friendly, like very cartoony. If you look up like Yowie chocolate on Google, you'll get a picture and you'll kind of be like, "Oh yeah, that's like a cartoon, kids
Mhm.
cartoon almost." And that was the image that was kind of portrayed, which actually really spread a bit of a Yowie phenomenon, funnily enough. And this all happened while I was a child, which made places like my region, people like came and drove there to try and find Yowies. And still
Mhm.
to this day, it still happens. Um, and I kind of went along my journey. And it wasn't until I was working in a Aboriginal community and I was having a discussion with one of the elders, and we were about to go to a particular site. And this site, I will say, this site is a site of a massacre. So, like, it's not exactly the nicest of sites. We knew that going into it. And we actually said the site that we were going to go to. And it was one of those sites that this community, they know it's a massacre, but they don't talk about it because they don't like the pain of it. Because also, this site, and this, funnily enough, it kind of shows you how intention works.
Mhm.
But this site was actually a place of healing and still is a place of healing. So the elders understood this, that by making this site a place of sorrow, right? That it would change the intention of this place and it would move from a healing place, a celebration place, into a place of sorrow, losing the gifts that this place actually offered. So when you go to this particular place, there is no plaques that there has been a massacre there for that reason. Um, it's only word of mouth that that story gets passed down.
Interesting.
And probably it's written in a few places because they don't want the energy of this particular place to change. Now,
Mhm.
does it this place have the scars of that? Does it still have the energy of that? Yes, of course it does. But it's not as predominant as it would be if it had everything else attached to it.
Mhm.
Now, the reason I'm kind of mentioning this is um, this particular place, the reason there was a massacre here was and this is kind of be a bit of a convoluted way to kind of go around it, but I'm get hold with me on the story here because it'll make sense at the end. But I'm going to tell it the way she told me, which I think is a really perfect way. Um, which is along the lines of there was a magic man within her family line. And magic men to Aboriginal people are people that literally can create magic. They are well attuned to the bush. They can literally disappear. They as some people believe that they can physically become invisible. They live for an extremely long period of time. They know how to get out of any situation because they can manipulate energy and matter, right? And they can also heal. And we're
So,
not talking There are some magic men within communities that are, like, more kind of like your witch doctors. We're talking about a magic man that's, like, high-end scale, like, they are with the community, but they're not really. They're kind of more in the bush.
It sounds like basically like a ancient
A druid.
druidic
Yeah.
hermit, ancient druidic
Mhm.
hermit, basically. Um, yeah, very kind of even pagan-esque in a way.
To some degree. Um, and because they live for longer than the average lifespan, they obviously build more and more knowledge,
Hmm.
and they can, in theory, avoid death. And so, what was happening at this particular point in time in Australia, he'd already been alive for a period of time, but they were rounding up the Aboriginals and sending them to a particular mission, which is not a nice part of the Australian culture, but it's a part of the culture. But like it's part of what happened, I should say, not culture, part of the history. Um, and so they were trying. The authorities knew about him, and they were trying to find him, and they managed to find a place where he was sleeping. And they caught him, and he'd already, by the way, at this point, been caught twice and got out twice. Uh, and they caught him, and of course, like that, he got out of it and disappeared. Right. And because he disappeared, the authorities got pissed off because that's like third time. Like now it's like you're making a fool of us type thing. And they knew he was semi-attached to a local camp of Aboriginals, but not fully. So they actually went and rounded up these Aboriginals that were already moving in the direction that they wanted them to, and they chased them. And what ended up happening in this site is that the men, in order to save the women and children, they said, "You go that way, like, you're protected," and they ran to this sacred place because they thought that they would be safe there, and there were, like, cliffs around it, and they pretty much got pushed off the edge of the cliffs and fell to their death on the rocks.
Bit gruesome, I'd say. Bit
I
freaking
mean, it
gruesome.
is.
Yeah, but that's
Um,
usually how things like that go, sadly, especially when it's let's say supernatural old culture communities.
yeah. And the thing with this is it's part of the reason that they believe that they went there is because part of their beliefs, because they knew what this place was, is that even though they were probably going to die from doing this, that there would also be healing because they had a firm belief in this healing energy. So even though that they were full into their deaths, they were saving their like the women and children, right? The future, and they were also as well using it to grow and heal from to further the community. So not a nice story. So
Hmm.
she's told me this story, and she's told me, and I'm like, interesting. And she's like, I'm like, wow. So the magic man got away, and I just like asked her, I'm like, so did they ever catch him? And she's like, no, like smiling at me. She's like, no, they never caught him. And I'm like, "Wow, that's like so do you know what happened to him?" And she's like, "Well, that's the thing." And that's when I found out that, they live for long periods of time. They do have this, and she was a believer that he could pretty much disappear into matter and this type of thing. And she's like, all of a sudden, she's like, "You know the Yowie, right?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know the Yowie." She's like, "Yeah, well, Yowie, to us, that's actually a magic man."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, it makes sense. People see the Yowie and then it disappears. They're super intelligent and smart. They live for a really long period of time. Like, they could go into a community and become part of the community and then leave. Like,
Hmm.
it fits all this mythology And I was like, "Wow." I'm like, "So why isn't this part of the local community?" And she's like, "People wouldn't believe us."
Yeah.
People would never believe that this is like a person that holds magic and does all these things, and that what they're actually seeing is an ancient tradition, ancient lineage, I guess you could say, within the Aboriginal culture.
Mhm. I mean,
Um,
it's insane to ever think that obviously something like that is real and has stayed over because we're at an age, at least with my belief, that we cycled down with spirituality and the veil got thicker, but I think a lot of mythology, a lot of beings, a lot of like creatures and everything did not go away. And now the veil is becoming again more transparent because we're reconnecting with spirit. So then you just have to wonder and guess and think like, was our perception of olden days and olden era humanity being silly and like believing in imaginary things or making up
mhm.
stories of creatures and whatever, or was it actually a bit more than that? Because you have Yowies, which is an example, and it has a huge like backstory. And actually, at some point, maybe I'll talk about the Native American equivalent, which is actually a darker version of that. It's like kind of like more of a monster of a after a person has passed on, if they practice magic and not like leaving that they still succumb to the need of power and are traveling the deserts like that, but they also shapeshift and whatever, just like what you said about Yowie and it being a person and
I
can
mean,
survive for ages.
I will say in saying this that because I kind of know a bit more around the beliefs around this, they do have like quote unquote dark and light
Also,
magic men.
there's good Bigfoots and there's bad Bigfoots, is what you're saying. Oh, cool. Because the one you're talking
Most of
about
them
sounds
tend
nice.
he's a nice one. He used to actually as well. He like it quite often helped people get away as well. Like he didn't not
Nice.
only help himself get out, he helped other people get out of like
Nice.
being locked up in chains and all this type of stuff. Which is also part of the reason he would like let cattle out to like a like because he would he it just cause mischief and destruction to some degree in order to create an aspect of balance
Mhm.
within the ultimate chaos. Um, but the way they kind of go bad is the power starts to go to their head.
Yeah.
They still tend to, funnily enough, they still tend to do balanced things. It's just, it becomes a bit overwhelming and yeah. Um, and that's where I have heard that some of the some of those ones, their appearances start to change and they start to get weird things, that are physically like, they physically look terrifying.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, you're talking weird colored eyes and, you know, just a vibration and energy that you're, like, even looking at them is that not a good thing to do.
I mean, but that's what comes with it, and that's why any practice of magic needs to be with respect and balance, and also is usually better done not like really quick and fast, but over, like matured over a course of time, especially if you're at that level, because it morphs you, it mutates you. You start shape shifting and evolving into something that is completely different because you're tied to something as how would you call it? As expansive and mutual mutable as magic, as actual pure energy
Mm.
and magic and shifting with that, and it's over like a course of a longer than a lifetime. You're
Yeah.
like some cultures, but like their equivalents of of Australian Bigfoots, actually that is like a promise or whatever achievement of immortality that they got to, but they weren't human anymore because they overcame whatever status of sage or oracle they were at, and then they became a misshape, whatever. They couldn't change back.
I mean, the interesting thing as well with this particular Magic Man, depending, because I do have to say that, like, even within Australia, the reference of Magic Man is different depending on the tribe as
Mm.
to what exactly it is. In the general broad sense, the actual reality of it is you would physically have to go through the initiations to become one to truly understand it. And the thing that I do know about that is when you get into those initiations, part of your initiation in a lot of those tribes is to actually declare that you are not a magic man.
That's funny. A bit of a reverse psychology, but in spiritual initiation terms.
The reason being is because, like, you think about it, if you're, like, saying, "I'm a magic man, I'm blah, 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 this, that, the other," right? You're getting ego and you're falling into ego,
Mm-hmm.
which can feed the darker aspects.
Yeah, makes sense.
So by claiming that you're, just like everyone else and you're human, you are staying more in that balanced light and people aren't coming to you asking you to fix all their problems. Naturally, the tribe will know who that is, but it doesn't need to be something that's advertised.
Mm-hmm. It's just plainly left to be what it is.
Exactly. So that's it, and I mean, that's why it is also so different. Like, if I was to go talk to tribes in other parts of Australia, I'd probably find out different things about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for people that are in Australia or are Aboriginal, possibly, that are listening to the episode, like, and you're like, "But that's not what I know." It may be different in your region that you come from. This is, like, one region and one particular area around their beliefs.
And actually, I think this is an important thing to mention. Um, Usually there's like such beings or things or whatever in different cultures, and that's the reason they're so similar, or there can be like the same thing found in different continents, because it's not necessarily that it is the same thing or
Mm,
whatever, but rather it's a similar being that just has its own background and evolution and whatever. Think of it like how we have different nationalities and different races and whatever. This is the spiritual cultural equivalent of that, um, because it's just, yeah, it's a naturally occurring thing, with what we grew out of, which is mostly occult, pagan, natural, elemental, whatever spiritual being that has lasted
yeah.
for lifetimes, and it still has glimpses, but it's, yeah, it's now
I mean,
rare.
obviously, this isn't pagan because they had
Yeah,
no
yeah.
pagan aspect. This is going beyond that. I will say though that I think I saw it was in a documentary, or if you can call it a documentary. Some people will call it a documentary, some people won't. And it was around the myths around Bigfoot, and I do know that some Asian cultures actually do believe that their Yowies have magic, and that's part of the reason that they can disappear and reappear and they can move and do things, and that I think even they believe that they could go through portals.
Ooh, interesting.
So
Would make
and
sense,
it's
yeah.
really interesting because that is also very obviously Asia is very close to Australia. So the connection between the two makes some sense to me.
Mhm. I mean, it, I'm just thinking over how odd it is that when I first heard about Bigfoot and was like seeing or watching whatever I saw of it from America's side of things, when I was a teenager, it was also a case of like it was a blown up thing and everyone was arguing about it and whatever. But at one point, I did hear a similar background. I can't remember it for sure. Anyone that actually knows about it, you can like write it in the comments. But it is exactly the same thing, that they can disappear. They're actually magical, not biological,
Mhm.
not some type of alien or whatever, or this, that, and the other. It's
Yep.
a different human evolved into being a Bigfoot, and they do have like different types of abilities and whatever, which is the reason you don't see them. And
Yep.
you can't have the evidence you need to find them besides really shitty evidence because they might have slipped up like maybe an ounce and it doesn't matter. Um,
Or maybe they chose to do that because there was a reason that they wanted to be seen in order for whatever reason.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all of these beings still do want there to be an awareness that there's something a bit more than most people deem. And there's a lot of beings like this actually. There's recently I've read like every single place has their own variation of some type of um evolved shaman, whatever, shapeshifter that usually becomes either a
Mhm.
guardian of a specific place, or just a person, whatever, living in the
Well,
middle of a specific nature resort for them,
well,
which is their home.
that is part of it. Like part of these magic men, part of what they do is they are guardians for the land. If people do
Yes,
wrong by the land,
that's
they
when they
tend to
attack.
do that's the wrong on the person, and they don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to like be standing right in front of you to do these things. They can like have the ability to do these things from a distance. But
hmm
they're also balanced. They're not just attacking people at will and random.
Usually they don't really do it that aggressively. I mean, depending on how dark or dense the actual being is,
That's true.
they'll just like teach you a lesson of being more respectful and thinking twice instead of mocking such areas or being egocentrical. If you pay respects, usually you might actually get away with just finding proof of there being such a guardian or whatever history you're
Mm,
looking for. They actually might share knowledge, but sometimes you're not going to get anything besides a very uncomfortable feeling, and a sense of being watched, or if you're unlucky, an
yeah.
actual, you know, mean
I mean,
occurrence.
I will say, funnily enough, I used to have a friend that lived in an area that backed onto like blocks and blocks of nature. And I do know for a fact that they got asked for permission for Disney to film a Bigfoot episode in the back, like because part of that land is their forest, so, but
Mhm.
part of it is like national forest as well. So they got asked for permission to get like so then they if they ended up on their land, it was fine. So then they could film in that, like, forest, which goes on for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, like, forever type not forever, but, like, a decent amount. Um, and there were definitely times that when I was there that it was like it felt like I was being watched, and I kinda turn around and be like, "There's nothing there, like, it's just forest."
Well, forests where you feel like you're being watched are the most creepiest thing to me
I mean,
because
this is the thing, I never felt that creepy about it. It was always it felt like I was being protected, and it was fine.
I mean, I can imagine because I'm personally talking about my experiences, I guess, when that was the case, and it wasn't guardians or protective energy. It was more like sneaky spying on me or whatever else like that. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of luck in meeting guardians, sadly. Maybe like one or two. Most of the forest creatures here are kind of not that nice, not as nice as what you're describing
I mean, I don't I think it also possibly depends as well as
on
the
who you are.
I who you are, what you're doing, and I'm pretty sure to some degree because of the work that I've done and did in the region I lived in,
hmm
being such a huge area. Like, I mean, I was learning stuff about Aboriginals and Aboriginal culture for a period of time, that some of that stuff would have naturally transpired into my aura,
hmm
even though I'm not. Um, and so that kind of would have vibed it out, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Makes
You're like
sense.
your vibe attracts your tribe type thing.
I mean, it does. It matters a lot. Really does.
Mm. But I mean, there's definitely been times where I think I've seen something, but I wouldn't say like I've definitely seen Bigfoot or anything. Like I've definitely seen a Yowie. Wouldn't say that.
Dude, I actually would appreciate or like to see Bigfoot and then eat my words about like everything about what I thought or said about it, because it's still though one of those like topics, and this is coming from a person that stares at like a bunch of paranormal investigations and videos and all of that stuff and researches aliens for fucking like weeks sometimes. And it's just funny what's happening with all of the myths and legends about this type
Mhm.
of stuff, because spirituality, you start like, going at it and etc. And you're like, oh, Bigfoot is definitely not real. 5 years later, you hear legends and whatever. Um,
I mean, yeah, I don't think this is common knowledge. I haven't found it anywhere. I think this is, funnily enough, this is kept closer to the glove because people just wouldn't believe it.
yeah, well, it's as the common misconception is with this type of stuff anyway. Like everyone imagines, let's say aliens and Bigfoot, to be like a biological, real 3D thing, right? And usually it's a lot more nuanced and not even like 3D. Um,
Mm,
and you're like looking at it at the wrong end.
yep,
Mm.
that's it. So I think on that note, guys, we may wrap it up.
Yep.
Um, this has been like a special little, I
hmm
guess you could say, investigation story time. More of a story time than anything else. Um,
I think it was good because it also gave me ideas on what I could potentially talk about. Um, I could possibly talk about that urban legend that I thought was totally fucking fake, and
mm,
it was accidentally, I think, manifested because it was real in some type of universe. We attracted it, and it's still a thing
yeah.
to this day. I feel it, like, so I know you know the story, but I think that's like one of the better ones I have.
So maybe tune in. We may record that as another bonus little episode. The reason we're doing these bonus little episodes is
We're going on vacation. There we
we're
go. I said
going
it.
on vacation. Yay! And we're gonna actually meet up in real life. So we will not have access to recorded episodes. So
Mm-mm.
we're pre-recording this
A
one
bunch
ahead
of
of
stuff.
time.
Yep. All of this
Mhm.
is scheduled and automatic. I'm not doing this manually. We worked a bunch and did that whole thing of like, I'm gonna go on vacation, but we're gonna have content that comes out while we're on vacation. We'll be like responsible, like, oh, anyway. But yes. So if you want to follow more of that, you can jump on over to Instagram because we're probably gonna post random photos and videos there of our time. Yeah.
Awaken Dreaming. I think it says a dot in the middle of that, if I remember
Awaken.dreaming
correctly.
on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah. But you'll find the links below as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yes, you do. You will. I think it. Yep. I still haven't made them look nice. It will happen with time. You can still find what you need below. But
All right, guys, we're gonna leave you there.
have a good one. Hope you enjoyed story time with me and Jess.
And just remember, it's time to start living. Stop dreaming
Your life
your life
away.
away.
Yes, because we're here to actually be in it and live it.
Hmm.
So,
That's it. We'll see you next time. Bye.
bye.